Hi, I'm Steve Laskovich of Luminous Works with, yes, part three of throwing shade, making shadows, this time mostly in Photoshop with some assistance from Illustrator. So welcome.
Go back to the shadow.
What was that? Anyway, we're going to make a shadow something like this, where we're going to pretend like there's a light source somewhere near the center of the top of the screen, radiating light both down and outward, making that shadow spread out like that. So I'm going to call this a spreading or spread shadow. I don't want that silly little thing there. And I have a starting point here. So here I have a type layer here in Photoshop, just the word shadow. And I want to bring it over to Illustrator so I can make a blend like we did in the first tip where we had a long shadow that was kind of crisp and clean. This will fade, but it's also going to use an Illustrator blend to help us. Now, I would have used Photoshop's 3D features, but as I've pointed out in the previous episodes, there's no more 3D effects in Photoshop. So we have to resort to other methods. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight this text. I just double clicked over here on that text layer so that I could highlight it. There it is right there. So I double click on the thumbnail. It highlights the text for me. And I'm going to copy that. Just, straight up Command or Control C. And then I'm going to pop over to Illustrator, which I've got running here. And I've already created a document of the same dimensions. In this case, 16 inches wide, 12 inches high. Now, before I paste this, I'm going to want to know exactly where on that canvas the text should be. So to give myself some orientation, I'm actually going to temporarily at least place that same file that we were just looking at there in Photoshop. Here it's called Spread Shadow Start. I'm going to get that. Since it's the same size, I can just click here in the upper left corner right there, and it comes in at the appropriate size. There it is. Now I have something I can line up with. Now I'll paste. Command V on my Mac or Control V on Windows. And there's a bug in Illustrator that wants to change the size of the text desperately. It has to do something with the ratio between the resolution over in Photoshop and 72. So over there, never mind. It's crazy. So right now, it looks like my font size is 1,000 points, which is kind of funny because back over in Photoshop, it was 240. That's right. It was exactly 4 1/6 times as big. You did that arithmetic too, I'm sure. Now I can grab this text, and I'm actually going to make it black because it's going to need to be black anyway. And now I can kind of line it up a little bit better here on. There we go. I'm tapping on my arrow keys just to nudge that into position. That looks splendid. Splendid. I won't need that image in the background anymore. So I'm going to select that image now that I know where the text needs to go, and it's there. But I do need to know which direction the shadow is going to go in. So I got a light source, I said, up here in the middle top edge of my screen here. That's where I decided it should be. So I'm going to use the line segment tool. There we go. It lets me know when I'm in the center, and it says intersect because I'm also on the edge of the artboard. I'm just going to make a line segment going off like this, touching the edge of the S so that the shadow will go off that way on this side. Let me make that a color I'll be able to see, like any color. Deselect that. And then I can go from that same endpoint there across the top edge of that W. I can't just reflect the first line because the W is shorter. There we go. Now I have something like that. Now I can see where the spread out part of the shadow should go. So let me get my selection tool back here in Illustrator. I'm going to make a copy without copy and paste this time. I'm going to grab the word shadow here with my selection tool, start to drag it straight down, holding Shift to go truly straight down. And I'm also going to hold down Option or Alt so that I'm actually making a repeat, a copy. And how far I want to go, I'm not sure. Probably about there should be good. The good news is I'll be able to adjust all of this later if I decide my shadow isn't perfect. We're never going to lose any editability in this. Now I'm going to make this one bigger. Remember, this is the spread out part. So I'm going to grab the corner of the bounding box here. I'm going to start dragging. I don't want to distort. So again, I'm going to hold down Shift. And again, I'm going to hold down Option or Alt. But this time what that will do when I'm resizing is it'll grow in and out from the center. It's funny, the same set of keys, but a little bit different result here. And then I can get those edges. Look at that. That's perfect. Right on those pink lines I made. And now what I need is just a couple hundred more copies that are directly in between the small one and the big one. That is nice and incrementally go up. So it looks like one smooth transition. So I'll give you about 25 minutes, maybe an hour to make, no, I'm not going to do that to you. What we're going to do instead is use the blend tool, just as we did in the first exercise. That is tip number 1 of throwing shade. And I'm going to take the blend tool, I'll click somewhere on this H here, and then I'll click somewhere on the H over here. It doesn't really matter. And it creates, well, 1. It's silly. So I double click on the blend tool, it gets me the blend options. It says it's trying to make smooth color. Yeah, not succeeding. I go to specified steps. Yeah, 1 does not smooth make. So I'll put in literally 200. I don't know how many I really need, but that should, yep, that does it. Yep, that looks good. So I have this spreading out thing that conforms to the top edges of my letters along the top. Now I can take this thing, this blend, this spreading shadow thing, and I'm going to copy it here, go back to Photoshop. Now, if it was just a single type layer, it would paste in at 24% the size it should. But luckily, it's a blend, so it's a little fancier. So when I paste, it's not going to do that silliness. I'm also going to paste it as a smart object, which means I'll be able to go back to Illustrator and edit it later, but also I can apply filters here in Photoshop, Photoshop filters to it non-destructively, editably, changeably. Click OK. Oh yeah, I've noticed it's kind of slow. It's like it's trying to communicate with Illustrator, trying to find out what it should look like. There it is. I know it's the right size, so I'm not going to try to resize it or reshape it when I've got the control handles here. I'm just going to hit Enter. And once it commits in, 4 to 6 weeks or 46 weeks, there we go. I can take that layer, that smart object layer, put it below the text. Yay, now I can see it. And use my move tool to finally get it into the right position. I'm trying to move it down, and it would be nice if it listened to me. It looks like I need to move it over to the left a little bit. So I'm nudging it with my arrow keys, which when you have the move tool, moves things about a pixel at a time. Looking good, right? Yeah, I thought so. But it's not blurry. It's not blurry at the edges. And we need to get a nice fading blur. That is, it's relatively sharp at the top and really fuzzy, or as fuzzy as we want it to be, at the bottom. And there's a great set of filters that will give us this. They are the blur gallery filters. So I'm going to go up to, let's see, make sure that layer is highlighted. It is the smart object. Go up to Filter, Blur Gallery, and the one I want is called Iris Blur. Now, what an iris blur does is it leaves the center of this iris, this opening, as it were, virtual, like lens or something, and leaves that part sharp, but towards the edges it gets increasingly blurry. Now I want that center, the sharp part, to be where the light source is. So let me actually zoom out a little bit here. I'm just using the old Command minus or Control minus, and I'm going to grab this central part, the pin they call it, and I'm going to move that up, right up here, right towards the middle of the top edge. And the pink line you see on the outside, that's the extent to which the blur goes. That is the blurriest part. So I'm going to get it something like this. So it's going past the outer parts of the shadow. I can actually grab this little white dot and I can make it a little bit more squat. And then not the white dot to make it bigger again. Something like that. Yeah, that should be good. These little larger white balls here, you're to imagine another ellipse going through those, and anything inside that ellipse is sharp. So I want the ellipse that they form to go right along the top edges of the letters, which means I better make them go out a little farther for the most part. So that ellipse comes in, but here it's too low. And there's a way to move one of these at a time, and that's by holding down the Option key on my Mac, Alt on Windows, and I can move that right up there. And so this will be a nice shallow bowl where the top edge is sharp, the bottom edge is blurry, although it's hard to tell, isn't it? Because I haven't blurred it much yet. Crank that up a bit. Let's see what we got going here. Yeah, look at that. So the top edge is reasonably sharp. The bottom edge is as blurry as, well, as I want. I'm not sure how blurry I want that. Yeah, that looks good. Something like that. And if I want it to be just even a little bit better, there's a high quality checkbox I can check here. I'm not sure it's going to make all that much difference for this, but it feels better. I'll commit. Takes a few seconds to render that. There we go. Now I can see it with Command 0, Control 0. Maybe I need to move that down just a smidge. There we go. And lower the opacity. I'm just going to make it like 70% opaque. So I'll just tap the number 7. And that makes the active layer 70% opaque. And yeah, that looks pretty good for a shadow. I might add a little, garnish by adding some effects to the text layer. And here I've got queued up a little bevel and emboss to give a little shininess to the top edges, a little darkness to the other edges, as well as a pattern overlay to some photo I had of some rusty metal that I turned into a pattern. So now it gets that kind of gritty texture that kind of riffs off the backdrop there. And there you are. There's a spread shadow with made in Photoshop somewhat, but with a very mighty assist from Illustrator with a blend.